I want to make posts, which we already did save for reading later, removable. For this, we need the information whether a post is on the list here on this post detail view, on this post detail page. And then, of course, we need to edit the session, and we need to get rid of the stored post there if it shouldn't be marked anymore. Now let's therefore go to our views and here to the view which renders the single post, this single post view. Here, when we load this page, we want to include information about whether this post is saved in our session or not. For this, here in the get method, we can add a variable is saved for later. And that should be true if the ID of that post is part of our stored posts field in our session. So we get our stored posts from the session with request session get stored posts, and that could be none, but it could also be a list. And if we do have stored posts, so if this is not none, then I want to set is saved for later to true if the ID of that post is part of stored posts. So here, I'll set this to equal if post ID is in stored posts. Else, if stored posts is none, I'll set is saved for later to false. Because if we have no stored posts, this post is definitely not part of such a list, as no list exists. And then here to our context for the template, we can add a saved for later key and store the value of the is saved for later variable in there. Now we need to do the same down there, and since we now really have a lot of code duplication with all of that, we might want to refactor at least that logic. I'll add a new method here to this single post view, which is not a built-in method which I override, but a brand new method I came up with. I'll name it isStoredPost, and besides self, I want to get access to the request here and to the post ID. And then we can grab this logic here, cut this and add it to this newly added method. I can access request session because I expect the request here, and I replace post.id with the post ID, which I expect as a parameter. And then here I simply return the result of is saved for later. And in get, I can then simply set saved for later equal to calling self.isStoredPost and passing in the request and the post ID. And we can now do the same down here. And we could refactor it even more, but that's a good start. And call the same method down there. And here we also pass in the request and that post. Now the saved for later variable is exposed to the post detail template. And therefore now here on this read later button, we can change the button text based on this saved for later variable. So here we don't always want to say read later. Instead, we can now check here with the if tag if saved for later is true. So if this newly added context key here holds a value of true. Or if that's not the case, in which case we want to say something else on the button. Now in the else case, that it's not saved for later yet, we will still say read later. But if it is saved for later already, we could say remove from read later list or anything like that. And with this, if we save all of that and I reload this article, it says remove from read later list, since programming is great is already on my list. If I instead visit an article which is not on my list yet, it still says read later. Now we just need to make sure that we also do something else if the button is clicked. And the great thing here is that we can still send the same request, we just might want to change our logic in our view when a post request reaches that view. Here at the moment, we do something if the post ID is not part of stored posts. Then we add it. Now we simply want to remove it if it is part of stored posts. So we want to add an else case here and ensure that we remove the ID from stored posts if it is part of it. And we can do this by using stored posts, and then there we can call the remove method to remove a value, in this case to remove the post ID. And then we still want to update the session either way after this if-else block, so that we override stored posts with our updated stored posts, where we either added the post ID or removed it. And with that, we should now be able to remove posts from our read later list as well. If we try this and I click on remove from read later list, indeed it seems like it was removed. The same for mountain hiking. If I then add something again, it does show up here again. So that still works as before. And now we got this read later list, which we can manage with the help of sessions.